Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome inside the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven, and I am your host. Just me and Alex today, as Tyler is preparing for some stuff with his master's degree. So just going to be the two of us. Tyler will be back on Saturday for our usual Saturday show. That being said, Alex, what's up, man? How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good tonight, and even though Tyler's out, he gets as many first team reps as Storm Norton. So, even if he's out, he's still with us today.
Yeah, I absolutely have to talk about that situation among the other situations as we prepare for the upcoming game between the Chargers and the 49ers. Quick shout out, of course, to Tyler's mom, already hitting us up with the super sticker. Always appreciate that. And yeah, we'll dive into, as we always do, the latest around the injury news. We have not been on the show, obviously, since Austin Johnson officially declared out for the season. And in a corresponding move, obviously, Braden Fehoko is signed to the active roster. So first and foremost, man, I mean, Austin Johnson, one of the more underrated players on this team. It's the torn MCL, a fractured kneecap. Obviously, hope that he's able to recover fully from this injury. But man, just such a big loss. And like I said on Twitter, it's a loss that's not going to get a lot of headlines, but he really has done a tremendous job along with Sebastian Joseph Day of kind of transforming the Chargers defensive line. And like I said, hopefully he's able to recover from this injury and come back strong next year.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is a big loss for the Chargers. About as big as you could get kind of in the interior defensive line aside from Sebastian Joseph Day. Positive as you're bringing up Braden Fehoko, who, let's be honest, should have been on the roster from day one anyway, but not much more to say on that. But yeah, no, I mean, this is a big loss for the Chargers in terms of a team that right now is already struggling to stop the run game, has had the issues that it has had already. And Austin Johnson was one of the lone bright spots in terms of, trying to craft the run defense on the interior. It's why they were, a lot of teams were running towards the edges. And so for this to happen is a pretty devastating blow. And the injuries just kind of keep piling up. It's not one that I don't think the Chargers, can't recover from per se in terms of trying to get value out of Fehoko and Sebastian Joseph Day. And trying to plug the holes there. But it's going to make, that interior line depth thinner than it already was. And it's going to ask for a lot out of somebody like Braden Fehoko, who's now on the active roster, as well as even more out of Sebastian Joseph Day.
Yeah, absolutely. The depth is going to have to step up, and I feel good about the depth. This is one of the few positions on the Chargers where, I feel okay about their ability to, weather an injury. So I assume that Christian Covington is going to be kind of taking on the starter role, for this team going forward, but it's going to be more of Otito Ogbonia as well, and more from Morgan Fox, and we'll see about Braden Folk. I mean, I would love for him to get his chance, but I still think it's going to be Covington and some kind of combination of Covington and Ogbonia, going forward. And I've been hard on Christian Covington. I felt like Fehoko was the right decision there, but Christian Covington has played well in his opportunities. Had a good game on Sunday against the Falcons in limited opportunities as well. So it's going to be a combination of players. But like I said, I feel good about the depth at this position, which is a rare case these days.
For sure. Definitely something you feel better than maybe before the season. And, in fairness to Christian Covington, had the big 4th and 2 stop to, stop the bleeding, so to speak, against Houston. But, so he could play. He's an NFL veteran, obviously. But yeah, just to rely more heavily on him and a Braden Fehoko that obviously has not played all season, in addition to what they were already dealing with on the edges, just a big loss for the line.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the other injuries, I was hoping for more of a firm update on Mike Williams and Joey Bosa. Didn't really get one today from Brandon Staley. Keenan Allen still considered day-to-day, did not practice. Sounds like he's still at least a week away from returning to the field. And then the one that we talked about briefly at the start of the show, Trey Pipkins dealing with an MCL injury. Brandon Staley said that he's going to be essentially a game time decision. He did not practice today at all. And then Daniel Popper throws us one of the bigger curveballs I can remember and says that Foster Sarrell is taking first team reps and not Storm Norton. So that really, I was mad. Honestly, I was like so frustrated when I saw that tweet. And of course, it could totally mean nothing by Sunday if Trey Pipkins is able to play. But I'm just like, what are we doing with Storm Norton at this point? He can't start when both of the starting tackles are injured, and you have to go from him to the practice squad, Foster Sarrell, who struggled in the preseason as a backup offensive tackle. It makes no sense to me what is happening. And everybody keeps on saying to me, like, oh, he can't be worse than Storm. No, he can. We have visual evidence of this happening in the preseason when Foster Sarrell, had a pass blocking efficiency rating below 95, which is really bad against practice squad players. So, like, throwing him to the Wolves against Nick Bosa isn't really exactly something I would be too interested in seeing. So I understand not playing Storm Norton over Jamari Salyer, but what are we doing at this point if he can't play over Foster Sarrell from the practice squad?
Yeah. Okay. Keenan, Mike, yeah, they're not coming back for a while. Joey not coming back for
I know,
a while.
I kind of zoomed through that before.
Yeah, whatever. This is the one to talk about because, like, first of all, the Chargers told us in the preseason, Trey versus Storm, that's a competition. This is going to be a starter spot. Here we go. And you're not going to play him over Foster Sarrell. You're telling us everything in the preseason was basically bullshit.
Antics.
Antics, right? They wanted to start Trey Pipkins the whole time since last year, which has been a great decision. Trey Pipkins has been a great starter. But you basically, from the end of last year and that Raiders game, decided that Storm Norton was unplayable. And yet he's this team's swing tackle still. If something happens to Foster Sarrell, can't believe I'm saying that. If something happens to Foster Sarrell on Sunday, they're going to put Storm Norton in the game for 40, 50 snaps, right? Like, if something happens to Jamari Salyer on the other side of the offensive line, depending on when it happens in the game, Storm Norton's going to have to come in relief. So how do you simultaneously say, okay, we trust this guy to come in as a swing tackle if somebody gets hurt, but we also don't trust him to start a game, right? Like, it shouldn't matter whether Storm Norton is playing 8 snaps or 80 snaps. Like, it should just be like, okay, we trust this guy or we don't. And so
Right.
it's pretty, like, bad. Like, and we could talk about Storm Norton and how that reflects on him. But for me, it's just about this coaching staff and the offensive line coaching, because if you were serious about the Raiders game and you were like, hey, we just can't put him on the field anymore because we'll lose our jobs if we put him on the field, why was he ever, like, basically offensive tackle 3 to start the season? And now you're telling us he's basically offensive tackle, like, 11, and we don't play him, for Foster Sarrell. And again, like you said, Steven, it can get worse because Foster Sarrell is probably not as good as Storm Norton, but the coaching staff is so horrified by what they saw from Storm Norton last year that they are willing to play Foster Sarrell over him. Jamari Salyer, I get it, because, he was your premium pick. We all agree that he probably should have gone, higher than he did because of the injury. But this is, A, telling you how they really feel about Storm Norton, but B, it just makes everything in the preseason and the run up to this and not finding swing tackle, not finding tackle depth, either through the draft, either through free agency, whatever they wanted to do, look a whole lot worse if you're not trusting Storm Norton to start over Foster Sarrell. So this, more than anything else, just raises so many questions about the Chargers' decision-making process and whatever the hell is going on in the offensive line room.
Yeah, man, the whole process has just been incredibly frustrating, and they never outright came out and said it, of course, right? But the whole messaging in the summer was, we didn't, basically they were telling us, they didn't sign any kind of veteran depth because they trusted Trey and Storm, like both of them. One was going to be the starter and one was going to be swing tackle, and they felt really good about that situation. And then, of course, you bring in Jamari Salyer, who they drafted as a guard, And then the instant that you see Storm Norton back out there for Rashawn Slater, it's like, okay, we're going to go with a guy who's been playing at guard all summer long. And to me, like, that should have brought up the warning signs, the flashing red signs, like, okay, we need to go address the backup swing tackle spot because we clearly don't trust Storm Norton. That was 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago, you've had 6 weeks to go out and find a backup that you trust to prepare for this same kind of situation. Trey Pipkins has been playing injured with his sprained MCL, and they still did nothing. And I understand, like, it's hard for guys to come in and work into the new system and things like that, but nothing. The alternative is going to Foster Sarell from the practice squad over Storm Norton. It's incredibly frustrating to sit here and watch them do nothing and then head into the most difficult stretch of the season. And in this particular game, like, whoever is playing right tackle is going to be blocking Nick Bosa and Samson Ebukam and Charles Omenihu and Drake Jackson, who are all 4 really good edge rushers. Like, it's whoever's playing right tackle is going to have a tough game, right? But if this is Foster Sarell, like, we're talking like 15 pressures minimum for me in terms of expectations if he's the starting right tackle. And that's just not a situation that I have any interest in watching. And it's not a situation where I feel comfortable about winning this game. And I already didn't feel comfortable about winning this game.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is just quite the decision. And like you said, it's also about the matchup, right? If you throw Foster Sarell out there against, I don't know, like a team that has like a bottom like 10 edge group, that's one thing. You're throwing Foster Sarell to the Wolves against Nick fucking Bosa. Like, what are we supposed to say? And so it's a weird feeling because, again, they just got flexed back into Sunday Night Football, which we didn't talk about, but you're going to have back-to-back weeks, potentially, depending on Trey Pipkins' health, of Foster Sarell starting at right tackle. And it's going to be really tough to watch. I hope for the best. Obviously, best of luck to Foster Sarell. But, this happening on the offensive line, the Storm Norton stuff, everything dating back to the end of last season, the preseason, not using draft capital or free agency capital to address the position, and then being here now, just sucks.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand how we got here into the situation with Storm Norton, where he's the unquestioned swing tackle behind Brian Bulaga, and now he can't even play ahead of Foster Sarell. So just mind-numbingly frustrated at this point to see how this is going on. So had a super chat earlier from Tyler. I don't know if he's still watching or not, but I'm sure a lot of people are wondering about the pumpkin pie. I went to Costco today. I really did. They didn't have any pumpkin pies yet. So I assume that's going to be a weekend thing for me. I'll go again on Saturday when I have some more time. So unfortunately, I haven't been able to go get some pumpkin pie, but it will happen before the game on Sunday.
Which Costco did you go to? Do we have any Fresno area listeners who can validate whether or not the pumpkin pie was truly out of stock, or if Steven is bullshitting? We need, like they have the poll election watchers. We need the pumpkin pie watchers to see whether Steven's telling the truth or not.
I have the worst poker face ever, so if I were lying, I feel like people would know. But I went to Shaw and I think that's Clovis Avenue for those who are in the area. So yeah. All right. Well, we'll dive in now to our usual deep dive conversation about the opposition this week. Obviously, the San Francisco 49ers. And, we're not going to kind of separate it like we do when there's the 3 of us. So we're just going to kind of bounce back and forth here between Alex and I. First and foremost, talking about the 49ers coaching staff. So there's been a ton of turnover with Kyle Shanahan and his staff over the last 2 years. I mean, that's kind of what happens, right? Robert Saleh gets hired as a head coach. Mike McDaniel gets hired as a head coach. And there's a lot of moving parts. So he's been the head coach of the 49ers since 2017. Currently, D'Amico Ryans is his defensive coordinator. Very hot head coaching candidate himself. Probably going to get hired and take some other assistants with him this year. They don't have an offensive coordinator. Kyle Shanahan is that himself. So Anthony Lynn, new coaching hire in San Francisco, is the assistant head coach and the running backs coach. Sounds like he's very involved with the game plan, with game management, and all of that for Kyle Shanahan. And then Brian Schneider is their special teams coordinator, another new coach. So I went back and looked. They had 15 coaching hires this past offseason to replace everybody that left with Saleh and Mike McDaniel to Miami. So ton of new coaches, but it still is the same Kyle Shanahan led team.
Yeah, this feels like the new, or Kyle Shanahan feels like the new Andy Reid coaching tree. At first, where just everyone ends up leaving, and going on to their coaching jobs. And so yeah, I honestly forgot Anthony Lynn was a 49er until 10 seconds ago.
There you go.
But he's there as the assistant head coach, and obviously, say what you will about Anthony Lynn's tenure here, but having another head coach, Anthony Lynn revenge game. It would be very Chargers-like, but having Anthony Lynn, in your ear as another, head coach voice who's obviously been in a lot of these big games and moments before, I think is, well worth having on your coaching staff. Talked about D'Amico Ryans doing great things with that defense. But I mean, Kyle Shanahan is the terrifying thing here for me, just because of everything he does creatively in the run game, the usage that he's been able to get out of his running backs, regardless of who's back there. And Christian McCaffrey's back there now. And he, I just think based on how the Chargers run defense has been now without Austin Johnson, still without Joey Bosa, his offensive play calling tendencies kind of terrify me heading into this game. It's honestly, considering the Chargers where they are as a team, in addition to the injuries and Foster Sarrell stuff, it's why I feel the Chargers probably have a little bit of a better chance against the Chiefs than they do against the Niners here, just because of Kyle Shanahan's offensive ingenuity and how creative he is in the run game in particular, and how much he will go at the Chargers, much like the Browns and much like the Falcons did, and not let up. And he's also a better offensive mind than those coaches, and has higher power tools on his offense in Christian McCaffrey and even Deebo Samuel to really expose the Chargers' weaknesses in the run game. So that to me is the terrifying thing to me about their coaching staff.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back and look at all of the games that the Chargers have struggled with from a run defense standpoint, it's all the outside zone schemes, and this guy is the son of the the godfather of if you will, of the outside zone offenses. So Kyle Shanahan, of course, had a ton of success running this in various situations. And the one thing that people kind of talked about in the offseason was that Mike McDaniel was kind of the mad scientist, if you will, that Kyle was kind of like grooming to be that next godfather kind of coordinator, and was very involved in the run game. Kyle Juszczyk has talked about it as well, that Mike McDaniel would just go and steal ideas from all of these different places and fit it into their specific kind of scheme. And so losing that kind of coach is so important to the run game, and subbing him for Anthony Lynn, I think, was a really smart hire from Kyle Shanahan. And for all of the game management issues that Anthony Lynn had as a head coach, like, I never doubted his ability to construct a really efficient and explosive rushing attack. And if there's one thing that Anthony Lynn knows how to do, it's get the most out of his running backs. And now he gets to work with Christian McCaffrey. Oh, and by the way, Elijah Mitchell, who ran for 1,200 yards last year, might also be back this week, and if not next week. And he also has Deebo Samuel. So, you want to talk about three pieces that you can just kind of move around and get the ball in their hands in creative ways. And, the Niners have the coaches to take advantage of those three players whenever they are all back on the field together. All right, so that's the coaching staff. I'm surprised so many people forgot that Anthony Lynn was on the Niners. I feel like we
completely forgot.
I felt like we talked about that this offseason, but it's all good. Again, free agency, a lot of moving parts here. A lot of coaching changes leads to players leaving and coming back in. So in terms of departures, I mean, DJ Jones and Laken Tomlinson, two of their biggest interior defensive and offensive line players. Alex Mack, center, who played with Kyle Shanahan for quite some time. I think he officially retired Arden Key, Jaquiski Tart, and Kwan Williams, key defensive supporting players, gone as well. And Raheem Mostert goes to Miami with Mike McDaniel. They just traded Jeff Wilson there as well, and so did Trent Sherfield. So those were the key departures. And then additions, obviously, Charvarius Ward, the big offseason one, Christian McCaffrey, the big in-season one. And then you're also talking about edge rushers, Samson Ebukam, Charles Omenihu. Ebukam comes from the Rams, and Omenihu was on the Houston Texans. Then they have some smaller signings, Tyler Kroft, Ray McLeod, Hassan Ridgeway, and safety George Odom. Forgot the safety tag there. But Alex, what kind of stands out to you here among this group from departures and additions from the offseason?
Yeah, I mean, really that they didn't, I mean, other than DJ Jones, it doesn't feel like they lost a whole lot. I mean, you know, they lose Raheem Mostert in the offseason, and you're like, oh, I don't know, maybe this is the end of Shanahan's running back by committee dominance. And then, oh, okay, well, Jeff Wilson and Elijah Mitchell find it. Oh, okay, we're trading Jeff Wilson and we have Christian McCaffrey now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that kind of stands out there. Charvarius Ward was someone that I think a lot of Chargers fans wanted potentially as a corner signing prior to the J.C. Jackson stuff. And I think Chargers were kind of connected to him for a bit. But he ends up signing with the Niners.
Yeah, Jeremy Fowler said that if they hadn't gotten J.C. Jackson, they were going to get Charvarius Ward. So
yeah, and Charvarius Ward has just gone on to be, you know, one of the best corners, obviously in the league this year. So he's really bolstered that Niners defense. And you get pretty solid like edge pieces. We talked about, you know, obviously Nick Bosa gets a lot of the attention, but you have Ebukam and Omenihu, and you know they get to feast off of potentially Foster Sarrell this week. So you know, like it just feels like they didn't really lose anybody that was like significant to them, really other than DJ Jones, and then they just brought in reinforcements and have not really missed a step. I mean, I know a lot of people will point to their record and be like they're 4-4, but I mean, this is a team that I think is going to rack up wins down the stretch, and still no doubt in my mind that they eventually end up making the playoffs and, like a Kyle Shanahan team, go on some deep improbable run.
Yeah, I will say Laken Tomlinson is a really good above average guard. You know, that's nothing to sneeze at, but like you're saying, you know, this is, you know, mostly of their supporting players, and that's kind of what happens when you have these, you know, expensive core players that the Niners have had for quite some time. So, you know, the defensive line thing with DJ Jones is really interesting because I mean they're okay letting him walk, right? Because you have Eric Armstead, you have shoot, I'm totally forgetting his name right now. The guy they drafted from South Carolina. Javon Kinlaw, who they drafted a few years ago. And, you know, both of those guys have been hurt, and they've just been plugging in guys like Hassan Ridgeway and Kentavious Street left last year as well. I couldn't even put him on here. And, you know, they're just plugging along, right? Like they've gone through like 5 or 6, you know, defensive tackles, and it just doesn't seem to matter. So this defensive coaching staff has just done a really fantastic job. So, you know, really big fan of what they've done in that regard. So it looks like we lost Alex for a second. He's getting his charger, but we will continue until he gets back. So we'll move on to the draft class here. Not a ton of draft capital for the San Francisco 49ers because of the Trey Lance trade. That's not going to change next year when they don't have any picks either from the Christian McCaffrey trade. So essentially they don't have a ton of production from this rookie class. Drake Jackson, like I mentioned earlier, their 4th edge rusher right now behind the guys that we talked about, and of course Nick Bosa. They drafted Tyrion Davis-Price, running back from LSU. I think he's on the practice squad. I don't even think he made the active roster. Danny Gray, the receiver from SMU, he does play, but again, he's kind of stuck behind the rest of those guys. And then really their best draft pick has been Spencer Burford, who's been their starting right guard, I believe. He's the guy that replaced Laken Tomlinson. So Burford is really their only starter here. Samuel Womack, Nick Zakelj, I think is how you say that actually, Kalia Davis, Tariq Castro Fields, and then Brock Purdy. Most of those guys didn't even make the roster. So for once, the Chargers have a rookie class that is, you know, producing more than an opposing team this year. So Really, like I said, just Spencer Burford, and then occasional plays here and there from Drake Jackson.
Did Tariq Castro Fields make the roster? Where is he?
No, he's on their practice squad.
Oh, okay. Because I know we both loved Tariq Castro Fields prior to the draft, and so he'll still have a chance next year to make the practice squad and maybe or make the roster and kind of move his way up. But I mean, this also wasn't a team that needed a whole lot from their draft class, really, right? I mean, the 49ers are loaded as is, and if you get some out of Drake Jackson and Spencer Burford, then that's kind of all they need out of their draft class in terms of just getting contributions from 2 or 3 players here. Brock Purdy in the 7th round. Let's see if he can start a QB controversy with Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo somehow. But aside from that, it's kind of a TBD draft class. It's not like maybe the Chiefs draft class that we talked about earlier this season, where they just have so many guys who are contributing right now. And some of the other draft classes that we've discussed. But for what the 49ers needed, they got some pretty decent contributors, and they have a stacked team on top of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So they'll have to make sure they're hitting on those late round draft picks, next year when they don't really have much of that capital. So sounds like there is a chance that I think Samson Ebukam did not practice today, so we might see a little bit more of an expanded role for Drake Jackson. And Spencer Burford actually has been pretty good, so excited to see that one. I know Tyler was a big fan of Burford and Brandon Thorne as well. So, all right, we'll move on here. We'll get to our victory formation segment here, which are the things that we need to see happen in order for the Chargers to get to a victory formation, which obviously means coming out victorious on Sunday night. So, Alex, what's the most important thing you need to see the Chargers execute in order to come out on top on Sunday night?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to change mine because of the whole Foster Sarrell thing, but I'm gonna stick with mine and just say the run defense. I mean, has to be a lot better. You have to get better play out of Kyle Van Noy. You have to get better play out of Kenneth Murray, who has been kind of a problem in this run defense. And most importantly, what the Chargers have done well, I would say, in the run defense technically has, particularly against Cleveland and Atlanta, they've done enough in the second half of games to at least kind of, decrease what the rushing production was after getting exploded on in a lot of the first halves of those games. And, then you force Jacoby Brissett into a bad interception against Cleveland, Marcus Mariota into a couple overthrows. And you have a quarterback in San Francisco who is not immune to a couple overthrows a game for himself, and Jimmy Garoppolo. And to me, that is going to be the key: is forcing Jimmy Garoppolo to throw. Any possession, I would say, that ends in a Jimmy Garoppolo incompletion, or at least a Jimmy Garoppolo play that isn't an explosive play to George Kittle or Deebo Samuel or somebody, is kind of a win for the Chargers, right? In terms of kind of keeping Christian McCaffrey at bay and limiting the explosive run plays. So for me, it's going, you could talk about the total defensive effort as a whole, but I think they really have to just kind of lean into, all right, we're not going to let the explosive runs happen like they have been letting them happen. And we're going to try to put the ball in the hands of Jimmy Garoppolo, at least for some portions of this game, and make him beat us. And if he beats us with Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel on a play, that's fine. But at the same time, they just cannot let themselves get completely destroyed and just say, okay, well, here's an outside zone run, and we know that you have Khalil Mack on one side and not Khalil Mack on the other side. So we're just going to keep doing it because you can't stop us, right? That just isn't an option for the Chargers in this game. Otherwise, this is going to be a pretty significant blowout.
Yeah, I think if you wanted to kind of take that point and just be a little bit more specific, you could, and just say that the Chargers need to be more effective on the edge. This is a tough matchup for this Chargers edge rusher group, right? Because they're going to be going up against Trent Williams, and Colton McKivitz sounds like he's back, so he's not a great offensive lineman, but he's a solid starter. But then the big issue, right, is that you have George Kittle and Kyle Juszczyk coming back and being healthy. And those two players just give the Niners such a significant advantage on the edge in the rushing attack. And we saw this past week, Kyle Van Noy and Derek Tuska and the little bit of Jeremiah Tauchu that we saw. And then the Chargers linebackers were not good enough on the edge. They were not good enough at preventing the Falcons running backs to get to that third level of the defense. And obviously we saw the result, right? We saw 200 yards rushing from the Falcons rushing attack. And this 49ers offense, if you play the same way that you did against the Falcons against the Niners, we're talking about like 275, 300 yards rushing. Like this could get really ugly for this run defense. And I think some of it is schematics, right? But I just felt like they were not strong enough at the point of attack. And, this is at some point, going to result in the Chargers doing their best run personnel package, which is putting Derwin James on the edge. And I love Derwin, but you're asking so much of him to be a deep safety, be a strong safety, cover George Kittle, and then, hey, go be our second best edge rusher. So, we put Kyle Van Noy as a dud, and I think that was being generous after watching the film. He did not play very well at all. Kenneth Murray as the backside linebacker did not play very well at all. This is officially like panic time for Kenneth Murray, in my opinion. And so if the Chargers can get right, if they can really, get after and be physical with the 49ers on the edge, then I think they have a chance. And like you said, force Jimmy into obvious passing situations. And, Jimmy's going to take some chances and he's going to give you some opportunities to make the plays on the ball. But if you're just getting gashed every single play on the ground, it's not going to get to that point. So my key to the game here or the victory formation for me is you got to get Justin Herbert on the move. And this is, I think, kind of, accentuated a little bit with this uncertainty at right tackle. But we saw really in the second half of that game, the Chargers offense really started getting going when they started doing more RPO emphasized game plan, if you will. And so, the Falcons defensive line, that was more so, I feel like, to create throwing lanes for this receiver room for Justin Herbert. But I think for the Chargers to really have a chance at not getting behind early, like I think you need to get Justin out on the move, out in some rollouts and give him some freebies and get this team, some momentum. So this is not a game where the Chargers can come out and start slow and just kind of survive a bad first quarter. This is a game where the Chargers, I feel like, need to get into a positive game script. And I think in order to do that, you got to get Justin Herbert out on the move, use some RPOs, use some run game, use some zone reads. He's getting healthier. Again, not asking him to go full Josh Allen here, but I do think the Chargers need to kind of take advantage of his mobility and his effectiveness on the throw, because this is not like an advantage for the offensive line. This is a really tough 49ers defense. We haven't even really talked about Fred Warner today. So for me, I really need to see Justin Herbert get out on the move, give him some freebies, and get in rhythm early so they can kind of stay in a positive game script.
Yeah, I think that's true. And just going back to last week with Herbert was really the first time that we've seen in a while, just kind of him, moving around, not just being like a standard like pocket passer really since the rib injury, right? And obviously during the rib injury, Herbert's had a lot of like batted down passes, and just didn't have his full range of motion clearly, as an issue. And not that that's totally fixed, but if you get him into those situations where it does feel like he's more mobile at this point and is more capable of rolling out to the right or the left, and just finding somebody that is open, like the Josh Palmer play that we saw towards the end of the game against Atlanta. So just more of that, hopefully. And also the Chargers are probably going to need more of that because AJ Terrell and Casey Hayward are not out this game, right? You're going against a Chiefs or a Niners secondary, I should say, that is very good in terms of the corners that they have, the depth that they have at all those secondary positions. And I think that the level of competition that you're going to be playing this game, particularly without having Keenan Allen and Mike Williams themselves, is going to be really tough. So I think they just have to get creative even have Justin Herbert in a couple situations where, he feels comfortable running the ball if they want to do that. But yeah, they cannot let Justin Herbert be stationary this week. Otherwise, like we've been saying in terms of the run game, it could get ugly fast.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a game where people are not going to be happy about the lack of D passes, but it's like they, they don't have the people to do it right now. And, watching Michael Banny play in the Jalen Guyton role and DeAndre Carter play the Jalen Guyton role is just, it's sad at this point. Like there's no vertical threat at this point. So this is going to be a game where Joe Lombardi is going to have to spam the easy buttons and just get into a rhythm and hopefully you get these extended drives. But if you get into a situation, and this is partially on defense, right? If you get into a 10-0 situation against this pass rush, it's just not going to get pretty. So Tyler's been on this about just how the team kind of looks like they're coming out and just kind of waiting and seeing how each game comes and plays out. But you cannot do that this week. You have to get out early to an early lead, get into a positive game script for both sides of the ball in order to come out victorious this week. And I think there is a chance to do that. I mean, like we're both, I feel like, pretty negative about their chances this week. But with the way that Justin Herbert played on Sunday, I think there is a chance for them to get out to an early. That there is a chance for them to win this game. But you just have to come out and be aggressive. Go for fourth down. Go for whatever you have to do, right? Like you need to come out swinging on Sunday night for this team to win. They haven't done that in the past few weeks. They need to do it on Sunday night.
Yeah, and anytime you have a relatively healthy Justin Herbert, then the Chargers can be in any game that they play, but
Right.
the difference will be the margin for error in each game. And the margin for error just in this game is not as nearly as much as it was against the Atlanta Falcons. And you're not going to recover from a fourth quarter that sees the Chargers down 14-0 or 17-0 because they were feeling out the game, and then they were like, all right, well, instead of the stick routes, maybe we do this. Okay, maybe instead of Foster Sarrell, we throw Storm Norton back out there. Like, you just can't have any of those moments where you're feeling out the game and like trying to do that. They got away with it against the Falcons. And they, maybe have gotten away with it against a couple other opponents, obviously, in this stretch of games where they have started down by 2 possessions recently against the Broncos as well. But they just don't have that margin for error against this Niners team that is better than them generally speaking, and B is now, while the Chargers are losing in terms of the health battle, the Niners are basically getting all of their players back after a bye week. So they're reloading.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we'll get to our key matchups here. I'll go first for this one. I think for me, it is. I mean, there are a lot of different ways that you can, attack this kind of matchup. But I think for me, this is an interior defensive line versus San Francisco interior offensive line matchup for me. This is not a great Niners interior offensive line by any means. I mentioned Spencer Burford. But if there is a weakness of the 49ers offense, it is that interior group. And if you can get pressure up the middle on Jimmy G, and if you can, force Christian McCaffrey and those guys to just kind of clog up the running lanes, I think you can be successful to a point on defense. So they won at Austin Johnson. We already talked about that. But this is a big game for Morgan Fox, and this is a big game for Jerry Tillery as well. If Jerry Tillery is playing, we don't really know what's happening there. He was not a practice for personal reasons. But Khalil Mack needs more help, man. Like he is asked to do way too much. He's getting double teamed, chipped, and there's no alternative right now. So Morgan Fox, Jerry Tillery, like they need to make an impact in this game. If we go back to the Houston game or the Cleveland game where those two were making an impact as pass rushers, the defense was able to force some errant throws from the quarterbacks. And Jimmy G is not like he's going to take chances. He's going to try and make plays that he probably shouldn't try. But there were 3 or 4 times where Greg Gaines would get in Jimmy G's face last week, and Jimmy G would just make a bad throw. He was off timing, out of rhythm. And then Rams had the chance to come down with some interceptions, and they were not able to do that. So, this is a big game for the defensive line in general, right? But specifically, Morgan Fox, Jerry Tillery, I think need to be on their A game in this matchup. We need to see that top 15 pass rush efficiency Morgan Fox show up in this matchup and really maybe fluster Jimmy G a little bit, because that's your chance, right? Is you get a couple turnovers, get some sacks, and get the Niners behind the sticks, and I think you can be okay on defense. So for me, it just kind of starts with the defensive line, in particular the pass rushers this week.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about the pass rushers, but the ones that are on the edge. And I mean, like, for me, that is this game because you have Trent Williams on one side, Mike McGlinchey on the other. Obviously, Trent Williams, one of the best tackles, top 3 tackle, like in the game today still. And he's either going to silence Khalil Mack the entire game, or depending on how the Chargers rotate the defensive line from time to time, like they did a couple times last week, be against Kyle Van Noy and Chris Rumph. Like Trent Williams is just going to take away a lot of pressures from you, and then maybe you have Khalil Mack a couple plays on Mike McGlinchey. Like Kyle Van Noy just has to be better. Like Chris Rumph also, like, coming back from injury this week. Like they just have to get some semblance of pressure there. Otherwise, if Jimmy G is just going to be back there with a lot of time to throw, then you're probably not going to force him into a lot of those mistakes. And that's going to be like a big problem. Granted, they didn't pressure Marcus Mariota a whole lot either. But Marcus Mariota, again, like, does not play with the types of offensive weapons that Jimmy G is right now. Right. And is probably, you just need more pressure on Jimmy G if you're going to force him into those mistakes with how that San Francisco offense is constructed. And so, yeah, I have a lot less faith in terms of their defensive line this game after watching the Atlanta performance, and just the Niners as a whole having a way better offensive line. But when push comes to shove, it's just going to be, can Kyle Van Noy or Chris Rumph get like a few extra pressures combined? Can Khalil Mack overcome Trent Williams, or if they put him on the other side, can he overcome Mike McGlinchey after kind of being a little bit of a disappearing act the last 2 weeks, aside from the fumble recovery that he got against Drake London? He's been kind of not a huge piece in terms of their pass rushing productivity. And it's kind of been a dud the last couple weeks in that regard. So they need more out of it if they're going to have any chance at establishing pressure on Trent Williams or McGlinchey in this game.
Yeah, 100% on the same page there. Khalil needs more help, and we're at the similar kind of stage right now as we were last year with Joey, and then Chenna kind of really picked it up towards the end of the season, but Joey's not walking through that door for the next couple of weeks, and neither is somebody like Uchenna and Wosu. So we'll see what happens with Chris Rumph. He's I guess supposed to be a game time decision early this week, according to Brandon Staley. So we'll see how that progresses. He actually would help, really, like he would, because Derek Tuska just like does nothing for me, and Kyle Van Noy really isn't there either. So hopefully Chris Rumph can get out there pretty soon. All right, we'll get to our bold predictions here, get a little creative. I'm a little sad that Tyler's not here for this one because I feel like he's the one who gets the most risky in this segment. But Alex, what is your bold prediction for Sunday night?
Okay, but Tyler gets the most risky, but he predicted a 20-point blowout and then completely reversed it when he made his pick on Saturday. So, is the risk there
Fair.
if you end up cowering out of the pick? I don't know. I'm going to say Josh Palmer has a repeat 100-yard performance and gets a touchdown in this game. They need production from their wide receivers, and frankly, he's probably the only receiver that has a chance at giving them consistent production, aside from DeAndre Carter on a couple third and fourth downs. But Josh Palmer, if the Chargers are going to win this game, needs to have a big one, and I'll bet on the fact that he does, mainly because I just want to see it happen. Not confident that it will, but here's speaking it into existence.
That would be fantastic. I thought Josh Palmer was so good in the second half last week, and for him to be able to string together some of these games, I think is huge for him. And they don't really have, like you said, they don't have any other people to throw to. So this is just going to be a Sam Josh Palmer game, in my opinion. But I think for me, bold prediction here, I think we get an Asante Samuel Jr. interception. He's been really, really close, really, for the last few weeks. I keep on saying this and thinking this, but we're really starting to see Asante Samuel Jr. round into a very solid corner. And I thought he was fantastic on Sunday with his opportunities against the Falcons. Had a couple nice tackles as well. So he's really starting to become a very reliable, dependable cornerback back there. And I think we do see him take advantage of a Jimmy G errant throw. And I think we get at least one turnover this week. I think, side note here, in terms of bold prediction, I've been so impressed with DeAndre Carter as a punt returner recently, not as a kick returner. That's still kind of a struggle. I don't really understand why. But DeAndre Carter essentially averaging 9.7 yards per punt return right now. I think we see him not touchdown, but I think we do see him get like a 20-yard punt return and potentially flip a field for the Chargers. So those are my two. Little bonus one, Asante Samuel Jr. interception, and DeAndre Carter 20-plus yard punt return on Sunday night.
Potential statue if he can just break off one of those touchdowns.
I know, man. It's really they do such a good job on both punt teams. You know, their punt coverage unit is fantastic. J.K. Scott leading the way. I think he's like 4th in fair catches forced this year, which is fantastic. But for whatever reason, that kickoff return unit just really it can't get going. But punt return wise, I've been really impressed with the way that Carter's making decisions, making people miss, and I've been excited about that.
Jack says in the chat, things aren't looking good when your bold prediction is a 20-yard punt return. We'll talk about game picks on Saturday. Until then.
Yeah, I will say, the special teams, they don't win that game against the Falcons without the special teams unit. So, should be fun. Ryan Ficken, excuse me, has been doing a great job for sure. Rye Guy TV wants to know what we're eating if the Chargers win this week. So I did the punishment this week. Somebody else can do it next week.
Yeah. We're going to say it's Tyler because he missed the show today. And Tyler already volunteered to do the punishment if the Chargers beat the Niners on the last episode. So put your comments in the suggestions below on what Tyler should eat if the Chargers beat the Niners.
That's right. We're going to throw Tyler under the bus for the punishment this week. Max D has pointing out if the Chargers go 2-0 over these next 2 weeks, Herbert is the MVP. I think absolutely he should get the MVP on the spot if he wins this game with Foster Sarrell at right tackle.
Yeah. I mean, he can throw himself into contention. If he really has 2-3 touchdown type games where, he has 200, 300 yards. I don't know if the legitimacy of him doing that behind what the Chargers offensive line is currently or with the weapons, but I mean, obviously the supporting cast has been missing for him. I just wonder if he has a little bit too much ground to make up at this point with Allen and Hurts and Mahomes. I think there's probably a little too much, but still a lot of season left. And obviously Josh Allen's health status is kind of up in the air from a week-to-week standpoint at this point. But, I mean, for me, the MVP at this point would either be Hurts or Mahomes.
Yeah, I think I would still lean Mahomes at this point. There's a lot of love out there for Hurts, and Tua's kind of creeping into that conversation. I just feel like for me, if you're not the catalyst for why your team is winning, then I think you shouldn't be the MVP. Hurts definitely has earned a little bit more than Tua for me. But the Dolphins being good is pretty clearly about Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, but that's just my opinion there. So Rye Guy points out that he owns a spicy seasoning company. He'll send Tyler some ghost pepper.
Sounds good. DM Tyler on Twitter and ask for his address because we've approved Tyler eating the ghost pepper if the Chargers beat the Niners.
Yeah, Rye Guy, message me on Twitter, man, because I actually really love spicy food. So if you make some salsa and stuff like that, DM me on Twitter at Stephen I. Haglund, and I'll definitely buy some. Like I said, I'm always looking for good salsas. All right, that's going to do it for us today. Alex, any final thoughts before we head out?
No, I hope that things change between now and Saturday so I don't have to make a game pick. But then again, the last time the three of us picked against the Chargers, they beat the Falcons. So I hope the same thing happens against the Niners. And just hope that the team continues to get healthier, continues to sort of go through these next couple weeks, and maybe at least win one of these next 2 games, whether it's the Niners game or the Chiefs game. But back-to-back Sunday Night Football games, terrible for my sleep schedule, but good for the potential of the Chargers if they can find a way to win one of these 2.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that there was like a lot of negativity about getting back-to-back Sunday Night Football games, but this team deserves it, man. They've gone through hell this year, so they deserve some nice Sunday Night Football shine. But we'll see what happens if they are able to steal one. I do feel like it would probably be more of the Chiefs game, but beating the Chiefs, I think, would be such a momentum building kind of win for them. So excited to see if that happens.
Is the last time the Chargers got flexed on a Sunday Night Football the Chargers-Steelers game from 2018? I don't remember if they've gotten flexed anytime since.
Yeah, they didn't get flexed in 19 or 20.
No, I don't think they did.
Week 18 was flexed, wasn't it? Wasn't that a flex game?
Oh, yeah, that's true. But like they also don't they leave week 18
didn't really have
unopened? Yeah, so they don't have a game. But I think this is the first time prior to week 18 they've been flexed in since that.
That sounds right. Yeah, that sounds right. Maybe I know it was the Ravens in 2018 was that was Saturday night.
Yeah, they got flexed on Saturday night.
Okay.
Same Network, season. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. So should be fun. I'm really excited about this week in terms of our coverage. There's our Blue Wire San Francisco 49ers podcast is actually a guy named Rob Lauder who actually works at the middle school that feeds into the high school that my wife works at. So, should be a fun conversation with him for the More You Know segment this week. And then Saturday, of course, we'll have our normal Q&A segment and our final thoughts and predictions there. Tyler will be back for that one. And then Sunday night, we'll obviously go live after the game. So hopefully we get some more positive health returns throughout the week. And that's really where my head's at right now with all of these injuries and stuff like that. So appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. Appreciate the comments. If you are watching this, make sure and subscribe, turn the notifications on. All that good stuff really helps us out. So does the audio audience, subscribing and leaving us a rating or review as well. So appreciate you guys. Appreciate you tuning in. And we'll see you on Saturday for our next live show.